Hello, welcome back to my Haunted Drive-In and happy summer. This is the summer solstice and it's a very special time. And to celebrate summer, we're back in the drive-in to see one of my favorite all-time horror films, Hellraiser.
We'll tear your soul apart.
Hellraiser came out in 1987 and it was a low budget, about $1 million, and it made about $14 million. British horror film directed by Clive Barker, who also wrote it and who wrote the original novella on which it's based, The Hellbound Heart. Hellraiser begins with Frank, a libertine man who is always looking for the next sensation. Of course, this is from the book. In the movie, we just see him in some place, it looks like it's a market in Morocco, purchasing the puzzle box, the La Manchon configuration, the Lament configuration it's also called. There's a lot of mythos about the puzzle box. I'm not that much of a geek about it, but if you want to know more about it, you can. There are many sequels to this movie, and I've seen a few. I have not seen all of them. Anyway, so Frank, he's bored with just his sexual conquest, let's say, and he decides that he wants to seek more pleasure and more risk. Then we see him back at his house, surrounded by candles. He's doing a little ritual. He opens the box and starts to scream because hooks come out from different angles, hooking into his skin, and he screams and something horrible. Some time has passed. Now, it's not really exactly clear, but we're back at Frank's house. Julia and his brother Larry, it's Rory in the book, it's Larry in the movie, show up, and they're going to move into this house that is really kind of disgusting. It's like a family house that Frank and Larry's maybe parents owned, and Frank was living there. And it has like weird religious artifacts all around. Julia goes up to the bedroom and has this recollection of this affair that she and Frank had. This part where Julia is recalling this affair with Frank, I think it's really good because this story, the whole nature of the story is about lust. It's about those forbidden emotions and those forbidden desires that the box represents. So this is like a portal to that. And in a way, it's kind of like a cautionary tale of be careful what you wish for. Because when Frank opens the box, now I'm getting a lot of this from the book, not from the film, but when Frank opens the box, he's expecting some kind of like beautiful women orgy thing, and he doesn't get that. He gets these Cenobites, who are these creatures who are in these kind of amazing, of course, makeup and costumes. And that makeup and those costumes really hold up. I should probably talk about that a little bit, but let me just go back to my thought. So Frank doesn't get the orgy that he was hoping for. He gets tortured. So Julia recollects this affair that she had with Frank. And Frank is Larry's brother, and he's all the things that Larry's not. Larry's a bit of a dud. Julia is she's really beautiful, and I love, love, love the actress who plays her, Claire Higgins. Claire Higgins is great in this role. I mean, she really shows that kind of lust. She is immediately attracted to Frank, and he's not going to say no. He's not going to take no for an answer, and he violates her on her wedding lace, which is highly symbolic. Her marriage is defiled, and she doesn't care. She wants Frank. When Larry cuts his finger when they're moving, and there's a really interesting little cross-cutting scene that I like a lot. A little heavy-handed, but still effective. When Julia is reminiscing about her affair with Frank, and he's like thrusting on the bed. Larry is downstairs thrusting the marital bed, and kind of, like I said, a little heavy-handed symbolism, but we'll take it. It's good. I like this kind of stuff. For me, Clive Barker really hits that sweet spot between high and low, And he admits as much. I've got this great book. I know I'm rambling, but I'm just gonna go with it. This is a great book about Clive Barker that I got on Abe Books, Shadows in Eden, edited by Stephen Jones, and it's chock full of all kinds of Barker stuff. It's nice, thick. I haven't read it cover to cover. I've just been kind of poking around. It's got great photographs from behind the scenes of Hellraiser, great interviews, and he stresses in every interview I've read where he addresses this that he loves the B-movie aesthetic, that he loves that schlocky kind of horror aesthetic mixed with something a little more literary. And that is exactly what you get with Hellraiser, especially if you tie in the book. Because the book is a beautiful work of literature. It really is. And listening to it, I've read it a couple times, and I've listened to it twice on audiobook. His use of language he's really at the peak. I don't want to say peak, but he's at his full powers here. Because he was still very young when he wrote this, and this was one of his first novels. But he's in complete control. And I think it's even the conceit of the box and this portal and what it releases when somebody opens it, and then what it contains when it's closed. It is very much what you see in Barker's work with this idea of like beyond the walls or underneath the floorboards, there's another world. There's a world of demons, and this world of demons is part of Barker's mythology and all of his work. But in this case, I feel like it's in control, because Clive Barker can sometimes go off the rails in some of his writing. And what I mean by that, it's almost as if he's spinning this fantasy world so fast that the rest of us can't keep up. This story has a great structure, and I think this kind of contains it in a way. It provides like a scaffolding for these ideas that are so rich, and this imagination that is so boundless. So Larry, because he's a bit of a doofus, cuts his finger, and there's a lot of blood. There's a lot of blood in this movie and a lot of gore. And he, kind of like a child, he goes up to Julia like, help me. And she's kind of disgusted. I don't know why she married Larry, but she's a little disgusted with what a dud he is, especially compared to Frank. And he bleeds through the floorboards. And in a very cool scene, that the blood feeds the pieces of Frank, and he reanimates into a partially constructed human, mostly just a skeleton with a little bit of muscle and blood. So Frank comes back to life, sort of, in this creepy room. They're having a housewarming party, and Kirsty is there. Now, Kirsty is very cute, and she is played by Ashley Lawrence, who plays Kirsty in I think maybe 2 more Hellraiser films. Like I said, they're like 8 altogether, and I probably have seen maybe 4. In the book, Kirsty is Rory, that's Larry in the film, friend, who's kind of this mousy woman who's secretly in love with Rory. So now we have this pretty girl who is kind of the innocent, which is kind of a standard horror trope, but it's not a bad one. I really like Kirsty's boyfriend. He has sort of that Simply Red hairdo from that time. That really high curly top. And I enjoyed the 80s clothes. Like Kirsty's mom jeans, they're to die for. But anyway, Julia goes upstairs, and she's still thinking about Frank. And the real Frank, the skeletal Frank, reveals himself and totally freaks her out. But somehow he convinces her to start picking up guys at bars and bringing them home, so he can get their blood and create more of his muscle. Now, again, Frank must have really been good in bed to get Julia to go this far, but she's very kind of an unhinged character. But it's great because, people have done crazy things for fulfilling these desires. And in a kind of like a neat montage sequence that is spread out a little bit, she brings men back and bludgeons them with a hammer, and then Frank kind of takes their essence and gives himself strength. And even that is like a great metaphor because there's something vampiric about it and something kind of there's the thing with Clive Barker, like I said, you're always dealing with this schlocky B movie type of aesthetic, but also something that's like on almost like a spiritual level, but very dark. And then of course Doug Bradley playing Pinhead really immortalizes that role. And it's funny because according to what I read, he could have played the part of had a couple lines as the moving man, and how much we would have lost out on if he had played that part and not Pinhead. I can't imagine any other performer fulfilling that role. And the Cenobites are really not on screen that much in the first Hellraiser, but because they became so iconic, especially Pinhead, each sequel they start getting to sort of having more of a presence. So a lot of different stuff happens. Kirsty ends up getting into this confrontation with Frank, taking the puzzle box, throwing it through the window, and running off with it. She ends up in the hospital, and she opens the box, and the Cenobites come, and they try to take her, and then she bargains with them. And the scene where the Cenobites come in the hospital are great. And then we get the famous tear your soul apart. This is my t-shirt that I made on Cafe Press. I wore this to yoga class the other day, and my yoga teacher really liked it, so that's cool. I'll link it below if you're interested in checking out some of my t-shirts. Yeah, so the Cenobites come, she does a bargain, and they show up and get Frank, even though he's dressed in Larry's skin, and Julia dies, and Frank ends up being torn apart at the end in a very gruesome scene by the Cenobites. And Kirsty and her Simply Red boyfriend are fighting off. The Cenobites are now trying to get Kirsty. She puts them back in the puzzle. The house explodes. I do like the ending too, because there was this homeless man who's kind of appears throughout the film, like eating bugs in the pet store where Kirsty works. Very strange. But he's sort of been following her. And at the end, the homeless man turns into this demon character and flies off. And yeah, that's Hellraiser. And we see in this, in the story, of the beginnings really of this idea that Clive Barker just really unleashed on the world. There were so many new things. Of course, this was in the 80s. I think I saw this film the first time. I didn't see it in the drive-in, I know that. I think I probably saw this for the first time when it was on home video, VHS, and rented it. I remember seeing it with a couple friends, and they thought it was really this like horrible, like tasteless, and of course I loved it. I really thought the Cenobites were scary then, and I still think they hold up. Like, I was really scared by the Chatterer when I first saw this movie. And now I'm just still fascinated. And like I said, those first 4 Cenobites really, I don't know, they're classic. Later when we get into these, like, I think it was Hellraiser 3, you get into this kind of ridiculous thing with the Cenobite, with the one with, like, the CD, the CD player on his face, and he, like, tosses CDs. Grumpy Andrew has a hilarious rating of all the Hellraiser movies on his channel. I'm going to link his channel below. It's really, really good. Yeah, so that's Hellraiser, and the book is great. Like I said, it's very literary. Clive Barker's a really excellent writer, and you should check out his work if you haven't, his writing. And I think The Hellbound Heart, even more than Books of Blood, I think it's a great place to start with Clive Barker. So that is what I thought of Hellraiser by the incredible Mr. Clive Barker. And Batilda's here to tell us what she thought. Now, I noticed that she's wearing her Cenobite dress. So, Batilda, what did you think of... I'm working here. Listen, I don't really think you should be messing with that thing, okay? I got it!